Hello, everybody. Welcome to the episode number 12 of the DevRel show. It's always one of my favorite moments every 2 weeks, talking with fellow, developer advocates, developer relation managers, people going within the sphere of like developer relation. It's just nice. And also, you know what? I love the demo part. Obviously, that was my idea, but it's not for that. It's just for the sake of, if you're a developer, if you're within DevOps, GitHub space, if you're a developer advocate, even if you are a developer advocate and part of your job is to learn new things and to be aware of like some of the new technologies, it's not always possible. Actually, most of the time, it's impossible for you to know everything. So at least having like a small glimpse of new technology, new tools, new services that we can use as developer advocate is just exciting to me. So again, obviously, I'm kind of like patting myself on the back right now. I'm saying like, oh, my show is so good, blah, blah, blah. But, it's like my show would be really bad if it was not about the guest. So with that said, super happy to have Zachary with me today. How is life?
Hi. Yeah, it's going well. It's been a very busy start to the year, certainly with things like events and stuff now starting to kick off. So it's good. It's going well. It's going well. I'm, of course, very happy to be here. I know when
Thanks
we
for being on
set
the
this up
show.
quite a while ago now, and it was great for it to come round. And yeah,
I
good
think
to chat. Definitely.
Yeah, I think you were because I kind of like had that idea a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago or something, and I just like put it on social media, and people like just said like, hey, yeah, I would like to be a guest, and I think you were a part like of the first wave of people who were like 3 years ago, like I want to be a guest, and finally I put the idea aside for many different reasons. It was not a good time for me to start a new show. And when I came back with the idea and said, like, okay, now it's the time to do it, I just ping you back and they were like, yeah, fuck yeah, finally. Like I put my name 3 years ago. So yeah,
Exactly.
thanks again for being here. It's pretty awesome because compared to some other guests on the show that I've never met in person, Zachary, we met at least once. It was at Devox UK, actually 2 years ago. It felt like it was
Yes.
a lot longer than that for I don't know what reason in my mind, but we were just checking the dates before the show, and actually it was Devox UK in 2022. So right when the conferences were starting again to be in person, and it was still like wearing the mask mandatory, and like people were kind of like unsure about what was going on. But that was not my first time at the Vox UK. It's one of the conference. It's the conference is one of my top 5 conferences. I really like the vibe there. I really like the organizers, the people. Like most of the people who are recurring speakers there, they're pretty nice people. But now I'm blabbering about a lot of things. Who are you? Tell us who you are.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Zachary. I am a developer relations manager over at Vonage. I now manage the client SDK team, which is part of the larger tooling team, which is part of the larger actually developer experience team now, which kind of obviously encompasses everything that is developer relations and that little bit more as well. So yeah, I've been doing that now as I've been as the manager for probably about a year and a few months, I think. Previous to that, I was an IC. I was the Android developer advocate, and as we go further back in my job history, I can't escape Android. I've been with Android on and off. It's been an on and off relationship now since about 2009. Yeah, I mean, all the way back to when sort of my university days, I was doing mobile app development. I was kind of getting into Android when it was the new, hot, interesting thing. And I kind of stuck with it over the years since. I was a freelance Android developer for like 6 years,
Hmm.
which made up a big chunk of my kind of career as a developer. I think after that, I took a couple of normal jobs as a developer for a company, and then and then that was sort of before I made the switch into developer relations. So yeah, I've been with Android a while now.
Hey, you've been doing this for a long time. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile just before the show, and I'm maybe not good at math, but I think you've been doing tech for at least 16 years.
Yeah, that's about right. Which I have to keep kind of pinching myself to remember that because yeah, to me it doesn't feel like it's been that long, and certainly kind of still finding new things to enjoy. So it definitely doesn't feel old, which is I think
I
the
t-
important bit.
I totally agree, but I don't know if you get that look now, like being in tech for 16 years, but like I do a lot of like coffee chat with people that want to start in tech or people that transition from a previous career, but like there's some people that yeah they're transitioning from previous career, so they're like close to my age, but people that like are looking for their first job, but like to work in tech, they're a lot younger, like it's their first professional job they're looking for. So first I feel a little bit old, like just age wise, but like when they
Oh yeah,
ask me about my background or they looked on my LinkedIn and like it's written like I've been in the tech industry since like it's been more than 20 years now, and with no exception, all the time, the reaction is some form of like, oh shit, like wow, like yeah, like, and I mean like I don't know how to take it. I mean like, is it that reaction because I look younger than the number of year of experience I have, or
that's
is
the
it
way to
just like,
take it.
oh shit, you're old man, which can be the case too. But like I got that reaction all the time, which is funny because I personally really, I'm joking, I do not care. I know I'm getting older. I know I've been doing that for a while, but I really enjoy having discussion with like younger folks or people that are starting, because that, when you are doing this for a long time, you kind of like have your ways of doing things, or think like you have your specific ways of thinking about different technologies, and it's great to be challenged by people that are new, that have like a different vision or different like understanding of things. So that's really interesting for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially for me, coming from something like Android, where as a platform it's evolved significantly over the years. The Android that I was working on in 2009, we were talking about strictly Java with XML based layouts, and that was kind of that's all you had, and that you had to deal with it. So when I talk to newer people, because I do a lot of the same as as yourself, I do coffee chats when I can, and talking to people that are getting into the industry now and looking to be mobile developers, it's a completely different world. I like to kind of do my old man rant about how much worse it was in the old days, and how much easier these young kids have it. But it's great to see because it really does bring new ideas and kind of new ways of looking at things, which is so important.
It is, and I kind of agree with you that the fact that like it's easier now, but at the same time, there's a part of me that disagree a little bit, because I feel like a lot of things were a lot simpler. Like I didn't have to choose between
True.
like 10,000 libraries, and I was just like, as much as like I'm focusing on Kubernetes right now, sometimes I just miss being able to like SSH into my server and like changing their upload things on FTP. Like I didn't have like to fire up like hundreds of like services that need to connect and work together. At the same time, having all those options, all those opportunities, make your work also at the same time easier. But I get where you're coming from with that. I do my whole man renting in the cloud once in a while. Actually, I'm pretty good at that, I think.
Yeah, I think it definitely, when you look back, it was a bit more like the Wild West, and it was kind
It
of
was.
you could just kind of do what you wanted and get away with it. And definitely when I'm looking at kind of some of my old code and stuff, that really shows. Yeah, there was a lot of design paradigms that didn't exist, and best practices that just were non-existent. So
I mean, I usually have no shame about a lot of things in my life. And I feel like I have reasons because I was junior, I was starting. But like a couple of years ago, I went to a local developer meetups, and it was like a networking event. And I was talking with a guy. And when we introduced ourselves, it was like, hey, are you the guy who work at that company? I'm like, yes, like, who are you? Like, I didn't work there for like 10 years. It was like, oh yeah, I'm starting a contract with them, and they asked me like to revamp one application that you've built when you were there like 10 years ago and that nobody touches since. And he started to smile like way awkwardly, and then, like, that meant like, yeah man, your code was really bad. And I was like, give me a chance. Like, that was my first job as a software developer, and as much as I love that job, we had no like senior people to help us. It was not a tech company. The most senior person has like 6 months more experience or 1 year more experience than me, which,
Yeah.
let's be honest, like, and we went to the same like school program to learn about software development. So I mean, like, I don't think it was that bad, but still I was like, oh no, someone is looking at that. Like, you should burn the computer, do something with it, but like, please do not check that.
And it's sometimes that kind of old code that's held together by gum and prayers. That's the stuff that works the best. Like sometimes stuff just gets so over engineered these days. I think that it
That is true, Will.
can be
That
an
is
issue.
true. That is true. Speaking about your role right now, your experience you have right now. So you've been in that new manager role for a year. You said like a year and a half or ish.
Yeah.
Uh, how is it? Like, how does it go? Like, going from an individual contributor doing like a developer advocate role, and now managing a team, which from what I've seen, you're still doing day-to-day stuff. You're not just managing, but like, what's your experience so far?
Yeah, so it is definitely I'm still sort of day to day doing what would be considered IC work, I guess, as well. I'm still kind of in charge of the Android side of things, so yeah, it's almost like a hybrid role at the moment. But it's been really interesting. I've always enjoyed educating. It's kind of one of the reasons I got into DevRel. It's kind of one of the reasons I made
Yeah.
that shift from just being a developer. I wanted to teach, and for me personally, the transition into a manager position is a natural extension of that. I want to be able to facilitate my team and people on the teams around me to do their job and to learn and to grow. And being a manager, feel like enables me to do that in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's kind of it was definitely a little kind of scary at the start. It was a bit of like jumping into the deep end. I've led teams before, but it's always been from a technical aspect. I've never really been a people manager, I guess is the way to describe it. So that was a big kind of learning curve for me. But again, yeah, I feel like that has enabled me to continue what I enjoy doing, which is ultimately educating.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've been manager in the past, and I personally, I don't like much the managing part of it, when you really need to like put your manager hat, and it's not like just like leader. You're not leading the team, or you're not helping them grow, but you need to have like difficult discussion, which
Sure.
I hate having with like people that like interior reports to me. But I really love the education part, and really trying to help people grow. I was telling my boss recently that, like, yeah, my job is to be like, I always call myself, as a developer advocate, the friendly, social, technical, approachable face of the company. So, yes, part of my job is to be that person who do live stream, and be that person who speak at conferences, and be like that face out there that represents the company, that show our expertise, that talk about our product, that can help and connect with the community. But I've been doing that for a long time, and I've been the front face for like a lot of time. And to be honest, at the beginning, I was like, yeah, I want that shit, like ego
Mhm.
boost. And like, I was like, that's amazing. And I'm still fine doing it. But like, what I really love to do right now is to put other people in the
Yeah.
front, and like trying to help them like shine and be like the star of the show. So either like with live stream, like sending my manager instead of like myself on the live stream, even if I could do it, like, it's a good way for me, or like helping like someone to speak at a conference instead of like me speaking at a conference. Obviously, when I meet my goals, because I still have goals and things that I need to do. But like after that, when I have the flexibility of like helping other people, it's something that I really love. And one thing, like there is a lot of things that I don't like about the tech industry, but I think one of the things I really love and I think we're pretty good at is like the people that are in the tech industry for a long time. I feel like most of us, we're pretty good at like trying to help the new generation. Like maybe it's not true. Maybe it's just like my network and the people I know, but at least my network and the people I know, I think we're like most of the people are doing a good job of really trying to educate other people, help them to reach the next step in their career, help them to be better at what they do. So thanks for doing that, Zachary.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think if to get this far into kind of the career, to be successful, you need to be able to lift other people up. You need to be able to help people around you. You know, you can be the biggest expert on something, but if you haven't got the people skills, no one's going to want to work with you, to put it bluntly.
Yeah,
So so that's it. I think those I mean, it's one of the things I always say, like, the soft skills and the people skills and everything else is just such a vital part
it is.
of the job, that, you know, those that make it to the kind of years that we have, they have to develop those skills, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote a blog post about that a couple of years ago, where I was basically saying that like and you may disagree. It's totally fine. I was maybe a little bit blunt with that statement, but I was saying like I feel like the social, the human skill for a developer advocate, it's the hard skill. When we always say like, oh, hard skill is what's really important. Like soft skill is always a little bit like it's a second choice, and like, oh yeah, you as a developer, the technology, but like, hey, you don't work that much with team members, it's fine because you're a good developer. I think like, I don't think it's a good thing for developer anyway, but like I think for developer advocate, it's even less true. Like you need the people skills, and I've hired people that didn't know the technology we're using, and it was like, hey, you know what, you're going to learn it, but like your personality fits the team, fits the vibe that we want to that we want to share with the community. You seem to have like as you said, the people skills to be able to do the job, so you're going to be able to learn the technology. For me, that was like less an issue. I really wanted someone that have what we usually call the soft skills, what I call hard skills. So I
Yeah,
totally agree with you on that.
yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. I think learning those kind of people skills is a much harder job.
It is.
I'm a big kind of advocate for saying that you don't have to necessarily have even been a developer to be a developer advocate if you've got those people skills. If you've come from a background of education or a background of presenting, whatever it is, like interfacing with people, that's the hard bit. It's pretty like, okay, kind of a bit of an over exaggeration, but it's easy to teach someone how to be a developer. It's easy to teach someone the code, but teaching someone how to talk to other people, how to interact, that's not very
way
easy to do.
way more difficult. I have a question about that, because I agree with what you said, and for a long time I disagree with the fact that like a developer advocate could not could not come from a non-technical background, and I was wrong, because actually, not a let me get there. Let me rethink my what I want to say, because I don't want this to sound wrong. I mean, for a long time, only developer, like people that were developer advocates, were people that were developers before. And I
Yep.
always thought that it was important, because when you talk to developer, let's be honest, as developers, we're a tough audience. We don't like bullshit. You need to know your stuff. You kind of always need to prove a little bit you have the technical chops to just to have discussion with some developers. There's always someone who's going to try to trick you and stuff. So like, to be able to have a discussion with the developer and they don't feel like you're, with all respect for marketing or salesperson, like they're able to draw the line, because you're able to have that discussion, because you have credibility when you go on stage, you have credibility when you talk, because you lived it, you were a developer full time, you created software. And I always thought that that was something like critical and important. But in the recent years, I've seen a lot of people moving from like a non-technical role, even a non like even outside of the tech industry, to directly to a developer advocate or technical evangelist or whatever the title role, without having developer experience. And they kind of like started to maybe the a little less technical thing, but like during they were doing that role, they were kind of like getting the gist of like being a developer and all. And I just want to maybe understand your point of view on that, because when you do that, as you said, like not as you said, but as I said in my mind, actually, it's not that different than like someone who go learn to be a software developer, does it for a year or two, and move to developer advocates. It's just like they do the switch quite faster. So what's your thought about that? Like, has in that role, someone doing that? You kind of said you were okay with that, but like, I don't know if you want to. I don't know if it was clear though, because I'm babbling for like the last 5 minutes trying to explain my point without like annoying too many people.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I guess one important point is that the role of developer advocate is quite a large spectrum of roles. Realistically, what that role is going to look like is going to be very different from company to company. And there are definitely developer advocate positions where you do need a good, strong technical background. For example, if you're on a tooling team, you're building SDKs, you're going to need to know how to write code from day one. However, because of that sort of spectrum of the role, there are definitely lots of companies where that isn't so much of a part of it. And actually, there's a much greater focus on building engaging content, on having a good booth presence, having a good, strong presentation ability. And it's those positions where arguably, as long as you're someone that's willing to learn and ready to learn, you don't have to necessarily have come from a technical background. I do think, I guess in many ways it's the downside of the position that the spectrum is so wide. It's very difficult. You can't, if you're a software developer, you basically know what's expected of you. Yes. Whatever the language is, whatever the framework is, whatever you're doing problem solving and you're writing code. That exactly. Whereas the developer advocate, it really does depend from company to company. So it's not it can't be a one fits all rule, but I do definitely see people who have come from a non-technical background and have been successful as developer advocates. And I would definitely, I'd encourage people, if they're coming from a non-technical background and are interested in it, to explore it, because there might be the right roles for them. Not to mention, of course, all the non-technical positions that are within developer relations anyway. So that's another option. I've seen people who have maybe come in as a community manager or, manage a technical writer or worked on social media or something, and then transitioned into a developer advocate role as they've gained that domain knowledge, that technical knowledge. So yeah, I'd say there's always options.
That makes so much sense. So first things about that, this is why I love having guests, having people that are way more brilliant than me to talk about those topics. It's great. Second thing, I now I think I understand a little more where my kind of like bias about that, which is not strong anymore. It used to be like, no, like, yeah, what the hell with those people? Like, I don't know if I was a gatekeeper and like in bad faith, I don't know what happened, but I think it came from the fact that like most of my developer advocate role needed me to be super technical to be able to do the job. And it's so true that like a developer advocate is not the same developer advocate at any company. Actually, there's a part of me that kind of like welcome that a little bit, because you can find the right role for you. There's the part of me that like had to search for a new job so often, and that like never know, even based on the job description, what exactly is going to be the job. And you need to kind of like have a discussion about like, hey, this is what I like to do, this is what I don't like to do, this is how I see developer relation, and I can go a little bit out of the box, but like like I've been doing that for a long time, that I know what I want, what I don't want. Is it your vision of the role? And this is like a discussion that is not always easy to have when you're like in the interview process. So sometimes I wish that it would be as clear as you said, like as an engineer or developer, like, I mean, you know what you're going to do. Like what's going to change is like the product you're going to work on, the technology you're going to use. But at the end, as you said, you're going to like try to solve issues by coding and creating software, adding feature, fixing bug. It's like, it's your job. It's what you do no matter where you go. So yeah, there's a part of me that would like wish developer relation would be a little bit more like that. That I guess that would make your life a little bit easier. But at the same time, with everything you said, I think it's kind of like interesting that it is not like that.
Yeah.
So like many other people with different experience, different background, different desire to do different things can find interesting role, because that's an interesting role, developer relation, like any role in DevRel.
Yeah, and I think it also brings great diversity to the role, to the industry as well, because sometimes you need someone that isn't a developer to try new things that actually work out very well. You know,
Sure.
we've definitely had kind of people on our community team come up with ideas for events and that sort of thing, which I would never have thought of. I would have never thought developers would have liked it, and then it becomes some of the most successful events we've done. And you know, so sometimes that kind of, when we talk about sort of diversity, sometimes that is diversity in career backgrounds, because
So true.
it can
So
be
true.
super useful.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? It made me think. My first job as a developer advocate, I was working at Microsoft, and the way it was structured at the time. So it's been 13 years maybe now, so it completely changed, but it was in the Balmer era too. But like how it was working is that every developer advocate had their own marketing person and the other way around. So we were tied with like a marketing person that was focusing on the same audience as us. And uh, like the good thing about that is that we were bringing different ideas. Part of me were like, I was like sometimes trying to, defend developer, like, hey, we should not do that with developers. So kind of like educate that person a little more about like how to approach developer. But on her side, she was like, yeah, Fred, like we still had the end of the day do a little bit of marketing, and we need to do a little bit of sales and this. So she helped me to see like the bigger picture, and not always
Mm.
like being like in my castle and like trying to defend my things, like, oh no, it's only DevRel way to do things. And it brought a lot of great stuff. Like we've done a lot of good things together, and things that would not have been possible if it was just me. So yeah, you have I like having you on the show, and I need to
Good.
find a
I like
reason
being here.
actually to go in your place in the world, because it's been forever. I didn't go in Europe actually whatsoever. So not just in your place of the world, but like in Europe. It's
Well,
been a while, so I need to find a reason to
definitely.
go.
There's plenty going on here. So
I know, I know, I know. With that said, as much as I love discussing with you about your journey about developer relation, I always try to keep like the discussion with DevRel around 30 minutes, like we were doing before the show. It's a little bit hard because like by default, most developer advocate, there's a reason why we do that. Like, yes, we love helping people, but God, we like to talk and we have
oh yes,
opinions about everything and anything. So that show could be like 2 hour long without us
easy.
like sweating it. We would be able to do that. But I'm really excited about your demo. Because you were talking about Android, you're gonna talk about Android, and the last time I've done like mobile development was like exactly, especially Android, was like what you said, like that was Java, and that was like a long time ago, and I was not really good at it. Actually, I've done a little bit of like iOS when it was like was it, no, it was yeah, Objective C before
Yep.
Swift. I've done some BlackBerry development that was also in Java, but I've always liked it because that was on the phone. That was
Yeah.
something interesting. You give like that power in the pocket of people, especially in the time where, in my case, in the time where like smartphones were not like something that we all had in our pocket. So those were more devices than phone. Like especially when I think about the BlackBerry experience I have, but I've never been really good at it for whatever reasons. So now I'm just curious to see like, hey, what's happening right now in the industry, and especially because you've been doing Android for years. Like I think your demo is going to be interesting, and if you want to share also bits about like what it was a little bit before, what it is now, like the big picture about like what changed in Android, I would personally love that. Don't feel like you have to. It's a last minute request, but like I just thought about this when you were talking about like all your experience. But anyway, let's move to the demo part, and you're gonna demo. Actually, you're gonna show us how to build a voice application using Kotlin and the
Yeah,
Vonage
so
Client SDK. Is it right?
that's correct. With your extra request, I have a little idea for that as well. So we can definitely kind of compare and contrast between two demos. We've got I can have a look at our voice application, which is actually one of the tutorials that we have on the Vonage website, and that uses a much more traditional kind of I guess old style way of building UI,
Okay.
because the actual demo, when I build demos, I try to minimize the extra I guess fluff around the
Mhm.
demo.
Yeah.
I don't want a developer to have to learn the architecture that I've used to build the application, or the framework I've used to build the UI. Or I want to make it as simple as possible, so I'm only showcasing the thing that the demo is about.
Oh, that's
Uh,
a good
and
way to do that.
and so for our tutorials and for the demos, I am still using very old UI and very old kind of XML layouts and stuff that have been around in Android since basically Android started. So we'll take a look at that. But what we can also do is then have a little look at a more complex, I guess, example that I have that uses more modern paradigms and also uses kind of programmable UI. So instead of writing all out in XML, you're actually writing your UI in code. So
Oh,
I think we can kind of do a little bit of both of those, if we have time, of course. But so what we'll start with is we will start with the in-app tutorial. So what I'll say is, let's see if I can get that. So the tutorial that we're actually using is this one from the developer website for Vonage. We do have all of these stuff is obviously on GitHub, so you can go and grab it. And there is also a coupon code that I have passed over to you. So if anyone is interested in what we're doing, they want to sign up, they can use this coupon code. You get 10 euros free credit. You don't have to give us any credit card information or anything at all. You can use the 10 euros and just try it.
I like that. So I'm showing the coupon code on the screen for a couple of seconds
Brilliant.
now. So feel free to use it. It's for your own pleasure.
Exactly. So yeah, so this is the tutorial that we're going through, and if you want to actually go look at the tutorial, there's a few prerequisites. Obviously, you have to have Android Studio installed, for example, because surprise, surprise, that's basically the only way you're going to be writing Android applications in 2024, unless you're a madman and you want to do something wild with Vim or something. But essentially, we have two components. We have the Android application itself, and then also a webhook server that's going to handle some of the webhooks that are needed for this process. So I've kind of already gone through a few of these steps just to speed things along a little bit,
Mhm.
and we have a web server here. So if we just have a look at this, I can explain it. Essentially, it's a very simple Express app for Node that's going to run as our web server, and we're using local tunnel to expose the URL endpoints on the web. So I've created myself a subdomain and also attaching the Vonage phone number. So it's a virtual phone number that's in the Vonage system that's going to be the number that's calling out to the phone from your application.
So now
And we have
everybody's going to text you now.
Well, they could try, but it won't do anything. There's basically a couple of endpoints. So we have an endpoint in our application that's going to answer the webhook, and then that's going to respond back to the webhook with some actions to tell Vonage what to do with that phone call. So the first is to play some text, so a voice that we're all very familiar with when we call an automated system, and it's please wait while we connect you, and all that sort of stuff. And then there's an actual connection endpoint. So that's going to say, well, from the Vonage number that we're calling from, call whatever the number is that we've specified in our app. So the actual phone number of the person that we're calling. And we've also got an event endpoint that we can just log any of the events that are going on the system, so we can see that. And then all we're doing is starting up the local tunnel application. So we can do that nice and simply, and that's now running, and that's now exposed to the internet because this local tunnel service does that for us, which is very nice. And it's also free. So once we've got all the server side set up, which, like I say, we're not really looking at today, there's all sorts of fun things that you can do on the server side. We have server SDKs if you're the kind of person that is interested in Node, PHP, all that sort of fun stuff. But we're not. We're interested in Android. So we've got that up and running, and we'll also set up a application in our Vonage account. So you can do this in a couple of ways. There's the UI actually on the website, or we also have a CLI that can do this. So if you install the Vonage CLI, you can then use the Vonage command to create your application, do everything from the command line. If you're the kind of person that likes that, you've either got a GUI or you've got a client.
I like that. I like that. I'm a terminal person, so that's perfect for me.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when you're just wanting to spin up and test something, I just think it is a lot easier to do in the terminal. So we've already done all of these things. We've created our application on the Vonage server. We've created a user for our application. Users are linked to the Vonage application, and it's designed to be a one-to-one pairing with your own users. So whatever your system is, you have users. They would have an equivalent Vonage user as well, which just kind of links to any activities that you're doing with the Vonage APIs. That way you can have like a nice one-to-one mapping. And then once we've finally set all that up, we're going to need to generate a JWT. So the authentication on the Android side is all handled through a JWT. This would obviously, in a production application, be created by your backend server. We're not going to do that here, but you can you can use the server SDKs to do that in a production environment. Here, though, we can just use the CLI to do that for us, and we're just going to pass in a couple of parameters to set that up. So the application ID, that's the ID of the application that we have created on the Vonage side. Subject will be the user that we've created, which in this case is Alice. We'll then have a private key to sign the JWT to make sure it's secure. And then we have this notion of ACLs. So this is probably actually a bit easier to show it on here. This is a way of basically restricting what a user can do on the Vonage system. So, for example, you might want to limit that user to only be able to access one conversation, or maybe they're not allowed to upload images, or maybe they're not allowed to, create new applications on the system. There's kind of all these different rules that you can do. Essentially, what we've got here is what we'd kind of call an admin token. You can do everything.
Yeah.
So this is just blanked out for the purposes of a demo, but again, you would restrict this more in a production environment so that way nothing is being exposed to the client that you don't want to expose. Like everything that's needs to be secure is kept on the server. So we'll generate our JWT, and this is what we'll use then to authenticate in our application in the next kind of couple of steps. So now we want to actually look at the kind of Android application itself. Let me just switch windows here. So what I've got here is essentially a blank Android application. This is literally what gets generated when you go into Android Studio and say new project. We have a blank, like I was saying, sort of XML layout, and if we do this split, you can see that it is just a very simple XML file. At the moment, it's just got a layout defined and a text view. And then we have our main activity, which doesn't do anything either. It sets the content to be that main layout view, and does some stuff around checking for the system bar and setting padding and stuff. This is just the kind of generic stuff that we're set up. Now, for those that aren't really particularly familiar with Android, it's the language that's used these days is definitely Kotlin, but that's all kind of built on Java. Kotlin uses the JVM. It's kind of just a better language on top of the JVM, in my opinion. And so you'll see lots of kind of similarities with Java, and you can still use Java. And what's really cool is you can use both Java and Kotlin in the same application. You can import a Kotlin class in a Java into a Java class. You can do vice versa. They're very interchangeable, which is also very nice. It means anyone that's working with legacy code can start to move towards Kotlin without having to change everything.
Oh, that's good. Never used Kotlin, so I'm going to learn today.
I'm a big fan. I think there's a lot of things you can do with it that it's just a little cleaner than Java as well. Although, to be fair, a slight tangent here, but to be fair, new versions of Java, they're making a lot of really great improvements. So I have to give some credit there, and I know that my Java developer advocate will probably tell me that,
to be honest, the last time Java was my main programming language when I started as a software developer, but it was Sun at that time.
Oh,
so
yes.
That just give you an idea, though.
Yeah, so things have moved along, but yeah, so a lot of the concepts from the Java ecosystem come over to Android. One of which is kind of the build system. It uses Gradle, which is kind of one of the build systems that you can use in Java. So we do a lot of our config in Gradle files. You can kind of see here that we're setting up the namespace for the application ID, which is the same as the namespace in this scenario, and targeting different versions of the SDK. I could talk about these things for hours and hours and hours, but again, this is kind of just the default configuration, other than the fact that we have imported the Vonage Client SDK. We have a couple of different client SDKs. We have specific ones for voice, chat, video, and then we have a combined one that is both voice and chat. So the idea there obviously is you pick the one that's relevant for your use case, or multiple ones. But that's the only change that we've made here. So back into our kind of setting up of the application, there's one more thing that we do need to do before we write any real code, and that's modifying the manifest file. So the manifest kind of defines everything about the application. It defines the application itself, the different activities, the different views, lots of these things. But the important thing for us is it also is where you define your user permissions. So if you've ever used an Android app, you might see a pop-up every now and then saying, oh, I need permission to do this. I need permission to do that. It's in here that we kind of define those permissions. So Android knows what to expect from our application. And as kind of fair enough, we need internet access. If we're going to build a VoIP app, we need internet access. We also need to be able to access the audio of the device. So these are kind of pretty boilerplate permissions for any app that's going to be connecting to the internet these days.
Yeah, looks fair to me.
And I'm actually of the impression that at this point, this should be the default. We should get this for straight away, because what application doesn't need the internet? But that's a separate rant for another day. So we've done that. we've got our permissions set up. Now we can actually kind of start building something out. And what we're going to do is we are going to start by kind of initializing a client. The kind of top level object of the SDK is going to be what we'd call a voice client. So we'll set up a voice client. This is where I find that talking and typing at the same time is incredibly difficult. But we import the Vonage API voice client, and we can then, in our onCreate method, which gets called when the application is created, we can kind of do some setup work around that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to request the permission to be able to access the audio. Now, what we're doing here is very basic, and again, you wouldn't do this in a production application. We're just literally just asking it, just give us the permission. We're also then assuming that the user is going to say yes. We're not going to handle the scenario where they say no, because this is a demo and I'm controlling the demo. But
good point. Good point.
Yeah, so I know that I am going to accept it, and so once we've done that, we can actually initialize our voice client, and this is where my keybinds don't work properly. So we are going to initialize the Vonage voice client, and we're going to pass in the context of the application. So the idea is this is one client that we can pass around our whole application. We only have to initialize it once. We can just kind of use this wherever we want to use it. And then before we actually kind of make a phone call or log into the client, I should say, we might want to do some configuration as well. So we can actually set up a config object. For example, here we can configure the region if you want to have a specified region where your voice calls are going to be routed through. Obviously, very important if you need to keep your information in a particular region. We support US, APAC, and the EU. So those are kind of the ways that you can route that. But there's other stuff as well that you can do. For example, you can enable WebSocket invites, which allows people to call into your application. We're not doing that today, but just kind of an example of another config that you can do. And then you set that config on the client. And now our client is all set up, ready to go. So before we actually use the client, let's build our very nice UI. Now, this is where I will say I am terrible at building UIs. I've always been terrible at building UIs. If you give me a nice design of a UI, I can probably get there. But coming up with my own, it's really bad. So here's my really bad UI. We have a text view.
I understand you so much. I understand you so much. Like, that was the thing when I was a full-time developer or when I had to create like demos or stuff. It's terrible. Like, I can give you opinions about UI. I can tell you if it's a beautiful one or not, but like building it myself, nope.
Exactly. Completely agree. So my amazing UI has 3 elements. It's got a text view, which we'll use to just display information about what's going on, a button to start the call, and a button to end the call. And that's all we've got. It's very basic. But we are going to then kind of wire that into our code. So this is definitely the old way of doing things. Like, there's a very much a disconnect between the UI and your actual code. So we have to create kind of variables to hold all the UI elements, and then we will kind of, within our onCreate method, we'll actually initialize those variables by finding the UI element in the XML file. So it should start to feel a little bit of an archaic way of doing things, and we're also going to get rid of this because we don't need to worry about that anymore. So we've kind of defined our UI elements now within our code, so we can start doing things with those. For example, we're going to have on-click listeners for our 2 buttons, one of which is going to fire a method that starts the call, one of which is going to fire the method that hangs up. So those are kind of all defined and ready to go. And at that point, we've got our UI elements. We can actually kind of start using the client SDK now, start actually putting in some logic. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to create a session, and this create session method takes in that JWT that we would have created earlier. So we'll have a variable which we'll call JWT, which will just pop up here, and it will be we'll copy that in later, but that's basically how that works. And then we can kind of expect some sort of return from that method. So we may get an error back, and if we're successful, we'll get a session ID back. So what we can do here is we can check if the error is not null. If the error has something in it, we should do something with that error. Otherwise, we are successful, and that's great. So what I'm going to do in these instances is for the error, we're going to use our nice text message, nice connection status text view that I created, and just display the error. Simple. And then hide the buttons as well, because we can't start a call if we've failed to log in for whatever reason. If we are successful, we will change the text view to say it's connected, we've logged in, and we can make the call button visible. We'll hide the end call button because we're not in a call yet, so there's no call to end, and we'll go from there. So the final thing that we want to do kind of in this method is we're going to want to handle the situation where the person we're calling hangs up. What happens when the call actually ends? So in that scenario, we're going to basically use a set on call hang up listener. That will give us a call ID and some other debuggy stuff that we don't need to worry about. And what we'll do is we will create a global variable that's going to hold the current call as a call ID. And when the other person hangs up, we're just going to delete the call, doesn't exist anymore, and we'll revert back to the same state where the start call button is visible and the end call button is invisible. So that's everything that we need for our kind of initialization. All that's really left is these two methods. So we need to be able to do something when we press the start call button and do something when we press the end call button. So let's just quickly kind of copy those in. So what we've got here is our start call method, and we're using this to just suppress the linting because we're being quite bad with how we're requesting permissions. Android Studio will yell at us. So we're going to say, no, we're aware we're doing bad things here. And then
don't do this at home, kids.
Exactly. When we fire the start call method, we're going to use the server call method on the client, and that's what initializes the webhook that we had on our backend back in on our node server. So that will send a connection via a webhook to that and then ask it what to do, and we're sending it the to of a phone number. So that's the phone number that we're actually going to call, which is my mobile. So that's the one that you can send me text messages to if you really want to.
Oh no.
It's fine. It's my work number anyway.
Okay.
And then yeah.
I had bad experience in the past, like sharing things like in my demos. So now I'm always worried when people do that.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I've got burner number after burner number, which probably outside the context of being a communications developer advocate probably seems weird. But anyway, but again, we're gonna trigger this server call, and that's going to give us back either an error or this outbound call. Again, we'll check the error. If there's an error, we'll display the text in that error so we know what's gone wrong. Otherwise, we're going to set that ongoing call ID to be the outbound call. So this is the call that is now currently going on. And we'll switch the buttons around. So the start call button will go away. The end call button will start because we're now in a call. So that's all set up. It just leaves the hang up method that we wanted to make. So we can do that as well. And here we're gonna do some unwrapping. So one of the nice things about Kotlin is you have optional values. So we're going to check to see if there is an ongoing call. Is that variable null? If it's not, we know that we are currently in a call. So we can actually then hang up. So as long as that has a value, we'll use that value to hang up the call. And again, we might get an error message back. If we get an error message back, display the text. You can see a theme here. Otherwise, the call is ended, so we can nullify the ongoing call variable. And that's it. That is how you would set up. That's all the code you need with a very nice UI, I know, to set up your make your app be able to call physical phones. So we can run that now. And what we've got here, this is an actual phone. I can probably show it on.
Actually, I think you're missing your JWT.
Ah, that's a good part. See, this is why pair programming works very well. So we need to, the last thing we need to do is grab the JWT that we generate. And we can pop that in here. And so I don't know why Android Shooter doesn't do wrapping by default. It's very annoying, but that is still building anyway. Okay, so we can now rerun that. There we go. Okay, that should. So we should. There we go. So straight away, we get asked if we can use the audio recording because like we said, we just blattered that and just said, please. So we'll say yes, because if we don't, the app will crash. And then we get a error, which is nice. So something's wrong with my token.
That is part of every demos. And while you check your token, we got a comment from Night Flight 89, which I know who you are right now. I'm totally blanking about like your real name, but anyway, Night Flight said this would work even better with Compose, which I don't know what they're talking about. I think is it a UI library?
Yeah. So okay. Yes, actually, that's a very nice segue. So that is the thing that I was kind of talking about with my other sort of example that we have, which is more on the chat side. So this is like a real-time chat, but Compose is basically the modern, better way to build UI, which is done all through code, basically. So, for example, as a very basic example, we have this kind of abstraction then of you've got your program, your code for your UI and your code for your data layer, basically, and kind of starting to build up a design framework for your code, and that's what this is built in. Now I can't remember, I haven't set up a preview for this, but so instead of using the XML layouts that we had, which is definitely the old way of doing it, if you were to go down the Compose route, you basically have this idea of components, and you can kind of design your composables. So for example, this is the code that you would need to create a basic login screen, which has got two buttons on it, one that says I'm logging in as Alice, one that says I'm logging in as Bob, and when they're clicked, they do something. And you can kind of, there's this whole idea with Compose of being able to build out UI in code, and then create like reusable components and that sort of thing. So I completely agree. It's the better way to do things, but it does kind of come back to my kind of desire to make demos as basic as possible. As soon as you start using Compose, you are introducing an abstraction between UI and data, which is good for a production application, but inherently means that you're going to have more classes, you're going to have more methods, you're going to have more stuff going on, which can get in the way of the demo itself. But
yeah, and the goal of that demo is not to build a UI. The goal of that demo is to learn how to use the SDK, which make total sense. And it's funny because I remember me when I started to like create apps professionally, like the UI was all made with code, and I loved it. And at some point we had that kind of like way, like everybody switched to those kind of like drag and drop tools that help you to generate the code of your UI. And seriously, I hated that because the code was like never really good, and I just liked to code. Like I don't like building UI, but at least I like coding the UI, even if my UI sucks at the end. So I like a thing like Compose. Uh,
yeah,
so
and
that's good to know.
I completely agree. I think, if you're becoming an Android developer, it's the thing that you need to get into and the thing that you need to look into, because this goes back to the whole, like, it used to be much more painful. This is the better way of doing things. XML is fine if you've got the most basic UI like in the demo, but as soon as you try and create like a production ready, you've got animations, you've got nice things going on, it sucks. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of happy to leave the demo there, and that just so you've kind of seen a brief look into using the
Yeah, yeah.
SDK, a brief look into the old way of doing UI, and a little bit of the new as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, thanks for from Night Flight. Thanks for the discussion. Very cool insights, and I completely agree on that. And based on the initial comment, if it was someone else, I would have like maybe not sure like this would work better even with Compose, because it felt like, I know it was not your goal, Nightfly, but like it felt like a little bit of an attack on like how you were doing your stuff. But I know you had the answer coming. I know you know what he was talking about, and I know the person, so I know it was not like something personal.
No, no.
But yeah, no, that was great. That was great. So as a reminder, the tutorial that Zachary basically did live is accessible at that URL. If it's too long to type, just go on developer.vonage.com.
Yeah,
And
easy
you're going to
enough to
be
find.
able to find the introduction to Kotlin. And also, if you want a rebate, 10 euros on your Vonage account, there's a coupon code shown on the screen. You can use that. Thanks, Zachary, for sharing that with folks. How is it working? Like, is there like a trial version before you have to pay, or is it depending on the feature you're using?
Yeah, so because of the nature of a lot of it, no, there isn't really a trial. It's all live, it's all real stuff, which is why we tend to
Mm.
give coupon codes. So when you sign up, you'll actually get like €2 free credit anyway, just by signing up, which is enough to kind of demo, like to test it out, to
Okay,
understand
cool.
the basics. So that's why we're quite happy giving out coupons, because yeah, it needs to be live really for you to be able to actually experience it. So that's how we tend to go.
Awesome. And I know it was not your case. It's exactly what I was saying. You said like, no, I was just trying to add to the discussion. So if the town sound condescending, not my issue. And this is exactly what I was saying. I know it was not the case.
Yeah,
If it was from someone I didn't know, I wouldn't have been sure. And I really want to keep that show friendly. So it's fine. Like when people point maybe for mistakes, like, oh, we're missing part of the code, we didn't see it. It just helps speaker. I don't know for you. I like it when I'm giving a talk, and that happened to me last week. No, 2 weeks, or I don't know, the last talk I gave, and I was trying to run a comment in my terminal, and that was not working. And someone in the room just tell me like, "Hey, you're missing that word in the comment." I was like, "Oh yeah, like of course I was missing that." And the guy came to me after and was like, "Oh, so sorry, I didn't know if I needed to say something. I decided to do that. I really apologize." I'm like, "Fuck no, like do not apologize, because like I would have probably find it at some point, because that's the comment that I use all the time, and I just like made a mistake." But the reality is like I'm giving a talk, and like if part of my talk is looking at my mistakes and trying to find them, it's not enjoyable for anybody
No.
in the room, and especially not for me as a speaker. Even if I'm used to have like the demo god against me or like having issues during my talks, you get used to it, and you feel that like it's going a lot better when things are not going well than it used to when you started to speak. But still, like if someone has the answer right away instead of me spending another like 30 seconds, 5 minutes, like please do it. So yeah,
Yeah,
my
definitely.
point was just like super long story to say like it's perfect when folks does that. And actually, one of the things I really like about the show, and it's starting to pick up now, it's still an early show. We're just like at 12 episode. It's kind of like still new, but like we're starting to have more and more people online coming for the show. So at the beginning it was mostly people watching the recording, even if it's a live stream, but now we have more and more people joining in. It's not always active. It depends on the show, it depends on the topic, it depends on, like, as I was saying, like the weather outside, is the moon, is a good mood today, I don't know, like it depends on many reasons. But what I really love when I do live stream is, yes, having the guests, but having interaction with people watching. So if you have any question to the guest or myself, if you have any comments about what's happening, even if it's just to say like, hey, well, like you said, like, hey, thank you, that was a nice demo and I enjoyed the discussion. It's always nice because
Yeah,
we love what we do, but it's also, and we don't do it to get praise or stuff like that, but like it's nice when people say like, hey, yeah, good job. It always feels nice, and having that interaction with like more people than just me and the guest is always fun. So on that note, as always, we've done the show for a little more than an hour, but it's, from my point of view, that was not a boring hour. That was interesting. As
great.
always, Zachary, thanks again for being in the show. That was a real pleasure having you as a guest. To be honest, I may still not do Android development after the show. I don't think it's
I
for
don't
me.
blame you.
With that
Don't
said,
blame you.
I really didn't know Kotlin. I mean, like I know by name, but I never took the time to look at it, and it looks good to me. So
Mm.
maybe if one day I have to go back, maybe I'm going to be in a better place than when it was only Java.
I think so. Especially if you ever need to use the JVM again, check out Kotlin. That'd be
Yeah,
nice.
I'll do that. I'll do that. So, last comment. I actually had the pleasure of watching Zachary live last year in Bucharest. So,
Ah,
yeah,
excellent. That was a very good event. I remember that one.
amazing. So, thanks again for joining us.
Yes,
Any
thank you for
last
having me.
word you want to share with folks about life, how to grow long hair, which I really need to know, or anything?
Unfortunately, I seem to have just managed to avoid my family's regressing hairline, so I'm pretty much the only one that does have hair. So, no, not sure I've got any advice on that one. That was pure luck. Uh, but still, thank you very much for having me. It's been great talking. It's been a lot of
Thanks.
fun.
And thanks everyone for being live. Thanks everyone who's going to watch the recording. And we're going to see each other in 2 weeks for the next episode of the DevRel show. So have a good rest of the day, everyone.